He once lived a life that many people quietly wished for. Not perfect, but stable. Not loud, but respected. He woke up each morning in a large but modest home, prepared breakfast with his child, and left for work believing he was doing enough. He was not rich in the flashy sense, but he was comfortable. Bills were paid. Food was always on the table. There was laughter in the house, even if it was not constant. For him, that was enough. People around him saw him as steady. Someone who did not brag, did not chase attention, and did not fight for praise. At work, he showed up early and stayed late when needed. He believed that effort mattered more than appearance. Over the years, this belief shaped his decisions. He trusted people easily. He believed that those close to him wanted the best for everyone involved. That belief would later become his greatest weakness. His marriage had once been warm, but over time things changed. Conversations became shorter. Silences became longer. Disagreements turned into cold distance rather than loud arguments. He tried to fix things in quiet ways, thinking time and patience would heal what words could not. But patience alone could not repair what honesty had already left. When the separation happened, it did not come with shouting or dramatic scenes. It came quietly, like a door closing in another room. He accepted it with sadness, but without anger. He believed that walking away peacefully was better for the child. He trusted that fairness would guide the process. He did not prepare for a fight because he never thought one was coming. During this time, the nanny remained in the home. She had been there for years, long before things started falling apart. She was older, calm, and rarely spoke unless necessary. She had seen the family grow, change, and slowly drift apart. She noticed things others ignored. She remembered details others forgot. She watched not with judgment, but with awareness. As the separation moved forward, financial matters followed. Papers were signed. Accounts were adjusted. Agreements were made quickly, often without deep review. He believed the documents were fair. He trusted the explanations given to him. He did not imagine that anything could be hidden so carefully in plain sight. At the same time, his work life began to shift. A business decision he had made years earlier came back unexpectedly. A partnership he trusted started to crumble. Numbers stopped making sense. Payments were delayed. Suddenly, meetings were tense. Calls went unanswered. He felt the ground beneath him soften, then slowly give way. Stress became a constant presence. He stopped sleeping well. His appetite faded. He spent long nights staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, and wondering where he had gone wrong. He blamed himself for everything. He believed failure was something earned, not given. When the final blow came, it came quickly. Legal notices arrived. Accounts were frozen. His position at work was terminated without ceremony. The explanation was short and cold. He was told the company had to protect itself. His years of loyalty meant nothing in that moment. News travels fast when someone falls. People who once greeted him warmly now looked through him. Others watched from a distance, whispering. His former partner and her close circle did not hide their reactions. They laughed openly, joked about his situation, and spoke as if his downfall proved something they had always believed. Social gatherings became painful. When he appeared, conversations paused. Smiles felt forced. He heard comments that were meant to be quiet, but were loud enough to sting. He stopped going out. He stopped answering calls. Shame wrapped itself around him like a heavy coat he could not remove. The house he once lived in was no longer his. He moved into a small place with limited space and thin walls. Furniture was old. The silence felt heavier there. His child asked questions he did not know how to answer. Why could they not go back? Why did people act differently now? He smiled and said things would be okay, even though he was no longer sure they would be. Each morning became harder than the last. He searched for work, but his past followed him. Rejections arrived politely, sometimes not at all. He took small jobs where he could, work that paid little but demanded everything. He came home exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Through all of this, the nanny stayed. She did not complain about the smaller space or the reduced pay. She did not speak poorly of anyone. She simply helped with the child, cooked simple meals, and kept the home as calm as possible. When he apologized for not being able to offer more, she told him he owed her nothing. He did not notice at first how closely she watched things, how she quietly sorted old papers, how she paused when reading certain letters, how she remembered dates, names, and numbers without writing them down. To him, she was just being helpful. The people who once surrounded him continued to live comfortably. They shared photos, laughter, and moments of joy as if nothing had changed. Sometimes those images reached him through others. Each one felt like a reminder that he no longer belonged to that world. At night, when the child slept, he sat alone with his thoughts. He wondered how everything had collapsed so quickly. He replayed decisions, searching for the mistake that had ruined him. He never once considered that the story he was living might not be the full truth. The nanny did. She remembered conversations from years ago that now felt important. She recalled times when documents were rushed, when signatures were requested late at night, when explanations felt incomplete. At the time, she had said nothing. It was not her place, or so she believed. Now watching him struggle, watching the child grow quieter, something inside her shifted. Silence no longer felt right. She began by organizing storage boxes that had been left untouched. Old files, letters, and records that no one cared about anymore. She worked slowly, carefully. Each page told a small part of a larger story. Some details did not fit together the way they should have. She did not jump to conclusions. She had lived long enough to know that truth requires patience. Instead, she continued quietly, day after day, page after page. Meanwhile, he continued to carry the weight of judgment. People assumed his failure was deserved, that he had been careless, that he had made poor choices. Even he began to believe it. What he did not know was that while the world had decided his story was over, someone in his quiet home had just begun reading the first real chapter, and this was only the beginning. The days after everything fell apart moved slowly, as if time itself had grown tired. Each morning he woke before the sun, not because he was rested, but because sleep no longer held him. His body was used to schedules, but his mind no longer believed in purpose. He would lie still for a few moments, listening to the quiet breathing of the child in the next room. Reminding himself that at least one thing in his life still needed him, he washed his face with cold water, staring at a reflection that looked older than it should have. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, carved by worry rather than age. He remembered a time when mornings felt hopeful, when plans filled his head before his feet touched the floor. Now, mornings felt like questions without answers. He prepared simple breakfasts. Bread warmed lightly, tea poured carefully so it would not spill. He moved gently, trying not to wake the child too early. When the child finally appeared, hair messy and eyes still heavy with sleep, he smiled in a way that hurt his face. The child smiled back, and for a moment, the weight lifted just enough for him to breathe. After the child left for school, the silence returned. It pressed against the walls, reminding him how small the space was, how far his life had shrunk. He gathered papers from the small table, the same papers he had reviewed dozens of times. Job applications, rejection emails, notices he no longer wanted to read, but could not throw away. He left the house each day with a quiet hope that today might be different. He walked longer distances to save money. He avoided places where he might see familiar faces. Pride was a strange thing. It hurt him, but it also kept him moving. People saw him differently now. Some did not hide it. Their eyes lingered too long, their voices softened in ways that felt false. Others looked past him completely, as if acknowledging his existence might somehow pull them closer to the same fate. He accepted it all without protest. He believed he deserved it. The nanny stayed behind when he left. She cleaned slowly, methodically. She folded clothes not just to make them neat, but to give herself time to think. Her thoughts were busy, filled with small details she had stored away over the years. Details she once believed were unimportant. She remembered moments from the past that now felt different. A phone call that ended too abruptly, a meeting held behind closed doors when he was not home. Papers signed quickly with explanations that felt rushed. At the time, she told herself it was none of her concern. Families had their own matters. She was there to help, not interfere, but things had changed. She had watched him lose everything with quiet dignity. She had seen the child grow confused and withdrawn. Silence, once respectful, now felt like betrayal. That afternoon, she opened a box stored under the bed. It had not been touched since the move. Inside were old folders, some labeled, others loose. She sat on the floor, easing her joints carefully, and began to sort. There were documents she did not understand fully, but numbers spoke clearly enough. Some totals did not match. Dates overlapped strangely. She placed those papers aside. Then there were emails printed long ago, likely saved without intention, simply stored and forgotten. She read them slowly, line by line. Her heart beat faster as patterns began to form. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just small inconsistencies that together felt heavy. That evening, when he returned home tired and quiet, she said nothing. She served dinner, listened as the child talked about school, nodded at the right moments. Her mind was elsewhere, moving carefully, planning without rushing. Days passed like this. He continued working small jobs, cleaning, lifting, repairing things that no one else wanted to handle. His hands grew rough. His back ached constantly. At night, he fell asleep sitting up, exhaustion finally overpowering his thoughts. Meanwhile, the nanny continued her quiet work. She organized documents into piles. She made notes in her head. She recalled conversations she overheard years ago, words that had not made sense then, but now felt sharp. She did not rush to tell him. She knew how fragile he had become. Hope given too early could break him completely if it proved false. She needed certainty. One morning, she visited a small office across town. It was not impressive. The building was old, the sign faded. Inside, she spoke to someone who listened patiently. She explained what she had found, carefully, without accusations. She asked questions instead of making claims. The person did not promise anything. They simply asked for copies. They asked for time. She walked home slowly, feeling both lighter and heavier than before. Lighter because she had acted. Heavier because truth, once pursued, could no longer be ignored. At home, he was struggling in his own way. Another rejection arrived that afternoon. He read it once, then folded it carefully, as if treating it gently might soften its meaning. He placed it with the others. That night, he sat alone, after everyone slept. He wondered how much longer he could keep going. He questioned whether effort mattered when the outcome never changed. He did not think about injustice. He only thought about survival. The nanny listened from the other room, recognizing the quiet sounds of someone losing faith. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. She knew now that what she carried could change everything. But she also knew that truth does not move quickly. It moves carefully, or not at all. And so, while the world continued to believe he was done, the second part of his story was quietly taking shape, unseen and uncelebrated. Waiting for the right moment to surface, the change did not come loudly. There was no sudden moment where everything made sense. Instead, it arrived slowly, like light creeping into a dark room through a crack in the wall. He did not notice it at first because he had trained himself not to expect change. Hope had disappointed him too many times before. His days continued in the same pattern. Work where he could find it. Long walks home. Quiet dinners. Short conversations. He still carried himself carefully, afraid that any mistake would confirm what others already believed about him. That he was careless. That he was weak. That he had failed because he deserved to fail. The child noticed changes before he did. Small ones. The nanny seemed more focused than usual. She asked gentle questions that felt harmless but thoughtful. Questions about dates, old routines, places they used to visit. He answered without thinking much of it, assuming she was simply trying to make conversation. Inside, the nanny was building something fragile and powerful at the same time. She had returned to the small office more than once. Each visit added another layer of understanding. She did not push. She listened. She learned the people she spoke to were careful. They did not promise miracles. They spoke about possibilities, about reviews, about procedures that took time. Still, they listened. That alone mattered. At home, she continued sorting. Papers were now arranged neatly, no longer scattered. She marked certain pages with small folded corners, a quiet system only she understood. She compared dates, checked signatures, reread numbers. Patterns became clearer. She remembered moments she had brushed aside years ago. A tense phone call that ended when she entered the room. A folder that disappeared from a drawer and returned days later. At the time, it had all felt unimportant. Now it felt deliberate. He remained unaware. He was busy fighting his own thoughts. Some nights he lay awake wondering if starting over somewhere else would be easier. Other nights he imagined a future where the child blamed him for everything that was lost. Those thoughts hurt the most. One evening, after dinner, the nanny asked if she could speak with him privately. Her voice was calm, but there was something different in her eyes. Not urgency. Not fear. Determination. He felt a quiet panic. Private conversations often meant bad news. He followed her to the small living area and sat down, hands folded tightly. She did not reveal everything. Not yet. She spoke carefully, choosing words that would not overwhelm him. She told him she had noticed some things that did not feel right. She told him she believed his situation might not be as simple as everyone thought. At first he laughed softly, not out of humor, but disbelief. He told her there was nothing to look into, that he had already lost, that reopening wounds would only make things worse. She did not argue. She simply said she would continue quietly and that he did not need to do anything. That sentence stayed with him long after the conversation ended. For the first time in months, doubt entered his certainty. Not doubt about his failure, but doubt about the story he had accepted. Days passed, then weeks. Life did not change on the surface. Bills still arrived. Work was still uncertain. People still avoided him. But something inside him shifted slightly. A question had formed, and questions have a way of refusing silence. The nanny continued her work patiently. She met again with the people helping her. More documents were reviewed. More connections were made. What once felt like a vague suspicion began to take a clearer shape. It was not dramatic fraud in the way stories often describe. It was quieter, subtler, a series of small decisions made by people who believed no one would ever look closely enough to notice. One afternoon, she returned home later than usual. Her steps were slow, her face thoughtful. She sat at the table and stared at the papers for a long time before putting them away. That night, she told him she was sure. She did not accuse. She did not raise her voice. She simply explained what she had learned, that some things had been hidden, that certain outcomes had been guided, that he had not lost everything because he was incapable. He listened without interruption. His hands trembled slightly, not from anger, but from something unfamiliar. Relief mixed with fear. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to reject the idea at the same time. Believing meant reopening pain. Disbelieving meant staying where he was. She told him the truth would take time, that nothing would happen quickly, that people might still doubt him, that he would need patience for the first time since his fall. Patience felt like a choice instead of a punishment. He agreed to let her continue. What he did not yet understand was that this decision marked the true beginning of his return. Even though the world still believed his story had already ended, the waiting became the hardest part. Once the truth was spoken out loud, once the possibility of it settled between them, time seemed to stretch even more than before. He thought knowing something was wrong would bring relief, but instead it opened a new kind of pain. A careful pain, a quiet one. He woke each day with mixed feelings. Part of him wanted everything to move fast, to be fixed immediately. Another part feared what moving forward would demand from him. Facing truth meant facing people again. Facing questions, Facing the past he had already tried to bury, the nanny moved through the house with the same calm presence she always had. But inside, her thoughts were sharp and focused. She had already done what many would never dare to do. She had stepped beyond silence. Now she had to be patient. The people helping her worked slowly. They asked for more documents, more timelines, more explanations. Every detail mattered. Nothing could be rushed. The process was careful, almost fragile. It's like handling something that could break if touched the wrong way. He struggled during this time. His work remained unstable. Some days he earned just enough to get by. Other days, nothing at all. Each setback tested his resolve. There were moments when he wanted to tell the nanny to stop, to let things remain as they were. At least this pain was familiar, but then he would look at the child. At the way the child listened closely to adult conversations now, at the way innocence was slowly being replaced by caution, that sight pushed him forward when his own strength failed. People outside their small home continued living their lives. The ex-wife and her friends spoke openly about him, confident that the story was settled. They treated his situation as proof that they had been right all along. They did not imagine anyone was still paying attention. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was not dramatic. Just an envelope with official writing. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. It was a request for further review, not a judgment, not a promise. But it was movement. He sat quietly for a long time after reading it. The nanny watched him carefully, ready to speak if needed. He finally looked up, eyes filled with something close to fear. "What if this makes things worse?" he asked. She answered honestly. She said it might. But she also said, staying silent had already destroyed him. Some risks were not choices anymore. They were necessities. That night, he slept deeply for the first time in months, not because he felt safe, but because his body finally accepted that something was happening. The days that followed brought more requests. Meetings were scheduled. Calls were made. Each conversation forced him to relive moments he wanted to forget. He spoke slowly, choosing words carefully. He was afraid of saying the wrong thing. The nanny sat beside him during some of these meetings, not speaking unless asked. Her presence grounded him. She reminded him that he was not alone in this anymore. As information was reviewed, reactions changed. People who had once dismissed him now listened more closely. Doubt appeared in places where certainty had lived before. Still, nothing was announced publicly. The world did not change overnight. The laughter from the past did not disappear yet. But cracks had formed in the story everyone believed. He began to stand a little straighter. Not because he felt victorious, but because he no longer felt invisible. This part of the journey tested his patience more than the fall itself. It required restraint, honesty, and trust in a process he could not control. And through it all, the nanny remained steady, proving that sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest resolve by the time everything reached its final stage. He no longer felt like the same person who had once believed his life was over. He was still tired, still cautious, but something inside him had settled. Not excitement, not pride, acceptance. The kind that comes after surviving something you never thought you would. The process had taken longer than anyone expected. Weeks turned into months. Questions were asked again and again, sometimes in different ways, sometimes by different people. Each time he answered calmly, even when the memories hurt. He had learned that truth did not need force. It needed consistency. The nanny continued to stand quietly beside him. She did not seek attention. She did not explain herself to anyone outside the small circle that now understood what she had done. She simply stayed present, the same way she always had. The first clear sign that things were truly changing came without drama. A decision was made quietly, without public noise. Certain actions from the past were officially recognized as wrong. Not loudly announced, but documented. It was enough. He sat alone one evening, reading through the papers that confirmed it. His hands did not shake this time. His heart beat steadily. He felt something close to peace. The child noticed the change before anyone else. Laughter returned slowly. Questions became lighter. The heaviness that once filled the small home began to lift. Not completely, but enough. People who had once laughed avoided him now. Not because he demanded apology, but because truth has a way of making people uncomfortable. He did not chase explanations. He did not correct stories. He let silence do the work. Opportunities returned carefully. Not handed to him, but offered. He chose wisely this time. He no longer trusted words alone. He trusted patterns. He trusted actions. The nanny prepared to leave eventually. Not because she was asked to, but because she believed her role was complete. When he thanked her, truly thanked her, she simply said she had done what anyone should do. Life did not become perfect. There were still struggles, still lessons, still quiet nights where he remembered how close he had come to giving up, but the world no longer believed he was done. And more importantly, neither did he. Life after the truth did not arrive with celebration. There were no crowds, no apologies spoken out loud, no dramatic scenes that would have made the pain feel justified. Instead, it came quietly, the way real life usually does. Slowly, carefully, almost shy. He woke up one morning and realized something small but important had changed. His chest did not feel tight. The fear that used to sit there like a stone was lighter now. Not gone, but easier to carry. He sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath, something he had not done in a long time. The child was still asleep. He watched for a moment, noticing how peaceful that face looked. For months, the child had carried confusion without words. Now there was calm again. That alone made everything worth it. Daily life began to take a new shape. Not better overnight, but steadier. He had work that lasted longer than a day or two. People spoke to him with more respect. Not because of sympathy, but because facts had a way of changing how stories were told. Still, he remained careful. Experience had taught him that trust should be earned slowly. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions he never would have asked before. He paid attention to details. The nanny stayed longer than she planned. Not because she was needed, but because she wanted to see things settle. She watched him grow into a quieter strength. Not the confidence of before, but something deeper. They talked sometimes in the evenings. Simple conversations, reflections on the past, lessons learned without bitterness. She reminded him that losing everything had also shown him who truly mattered. There were moments when the past tried to return. Old faces, old comments, old assumptions. This time, they did not hurt as deeply. He no longer felt the need to defend himself. Truth had already done that work. The child began asking hopeful questions again. About the future. About plans. About dreams that had once felt impossible. He answered honestly, but with optimism. As time passed, the nanny prepared to leave. The day came quietly. No speeches. Just gratitude. When she walked away, he understood something important. Some people enter your life not to stay, but to change its direction. He stood at the door for a long time after she left, feeling both loss and gratitude. Then he turned back inside, knowing he was ready to continue on his own. Life did not promise ease, but it promised honesty, and that was enough. By the time this chapter of his life began, the noise around his story had faded. Not because people suddenly became kind, but because they had found something else to talk about. Attention moved on quickly, as it always does. What remained was real life, quiet and demanding. Asking him what he would do next, he no longer measured his days by survival alone. There was food, work, and routine again. Not luxury, but balance. Balance felt unfamiliar at first. He kept expecting it to disappear the way everything else once had. Each morning, he walked with purpose. Even when the work was simple, he gave it care. He had learned that dignity did not come from position or money, but from consistency. Showing up. Finishing what you start. The child had grown lighter in spirit. Laughter came easily now. Stories from school filled the evenings. Sometimes they talked about the past, sometimes they did not. He followed the child's lead, understanding that healing did not move on a schedule. He thought often about the nanny, about how easily everything could have gone differently if she had stayed silent. Gratitude filled him, but so did responsibility. He knew now that being saved came with an obligation to live better. People from his old life crossed his path occasionally. Some nodded politely. Some avoided eye contact. A few tried to speak as if nothing had happened. He did not confront them. He did not seek closure from those who never offered truth. Instead, he focused on building something new. Slowly, carefully, he asked for advice. He double-checked agreements. He trusted actions more than promises. There were setbacks. Of course there were. Life did not suddenly become fair. Some opportunities failed. Some plans fell apart. The difference now was how he responded. He adjusted instead of collapsing. At night, when the house was quiet, he reflected on how close he had come to giving up. The thought still frightened him. It reminded him how easily people could be lost, not because they lacked strength, but because they lacked support. He promised himself he would not ignore quiet suffering when he saw it in others. Silence could be deadly. This part of his journey was not about justice or revenge. It was about rebuilding identity, learning who he was without the labels that once defined him, and for the first time, that question did not scare him. Time did not stop after everything settled. It kept moving, quietly shaping his life in ways he did not always notice. Part 8 of his journey was not about survival or proof anymore. It was about learning how to live without fear guiding every choice. He noticed the change one ordinary morning. He woke up and did not immediately think about what could go wrong. Instead, he thought about what needed to be done that day. Simple things: work, groceries, helping the child with schoolwork. The absence of constant fear felt strange. It's almost uncomfortable. He had learned to live with anxiety for so long that peace felt unfamiliar. Still, he welcomed it. Work became steadier. People trusted him again, not because of sympathy, but because he showed consistency. He arrived on time. He kept his word. He did not promise what he could not deliver. Slowly, his reputation rebuilt itself, brick by brick. The child thrived in ways he had once only hoped for. Confidence returned. Curiosity bloomed again. Home no longer felt heavy. It felt safe. He often thought about how easily life could have ended differently. If the nanny had chosen silence, if he had chosen to give up, these thoughts did not fill him with bitterness anymore. They filled him with awareness. There were moments when the past knocked softly. A familiar face. A careless comment. A reminder of how quickly people judged him. This time he did not shrink. He listened, then moved on. He learned that forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It meant refusing to carry poison that no longer served him. He began helping others quietly. Nothing public. Nothing dramatic. Just small acts. Advice. Listening. Support. He recognized the signs of quiet struggle now. Some nights. When the house was still, he reflected on how much strength he had discovered only after losing everything. Strength he never knew he had. This part of his life did not make headlines, but it mattered the most. By the time this stage of his life arrived, he no longer measured progress by money or public approval. Those things had once defined success for him, but losing everything had changed the way he saw value. Part 9 of his journey was quieter, deeper, and more personal than anything before. He had rebuilt enough stability to stop worrying about daily survival. Bills were paid on time. Food was always in the kitchen. The child felt secure again. These things might have seemed small to others, but to him, they were victories earned through pain and patience. He noticed how differently he listened now. Before, he often listened only to respond or defend himself. Now, he listened to understand. Conversations carried more meaning. Silence no longer felt uncomfortable. Work continued steadily. People trusted him with responsibility again, not because of his past position, but because of how carefully he handled the present. He double-checked everything. He documented details. He protected himself without becoming bitter. There were moments when memories surfaced unexpectedly. A familiar street. A phrase spoken the same way it once was. Instead of pain, these memories brought clarity. They reminded him how far he had come. The child grew stronger each day, asking thoughtful questions about life and fairness. He answered honestly, never hiding hardship, but never letting it define their future. Sometimes he thought about the people who had laughed when he fell. He did not feel anger anymore. He felt distance. Emotional distance that protected his peace. He learned that healing was not a finish line. It was a way of living. This part of the story did not announce itself loudly, but it marked the moment when he finally believed without doubt that his life belonged to him again. The final phase of his journey did not feel like an ending. It felt more like a quiet morning after a long storm where the damage was visible but the air was calm again. Part 10 was not about proving anything to the world. It was about choosing how to live after everything had been stripped away, slowly rebuilt. He no longer woke up with fear sitting in his chest. Problems still existed, but they no longer felt like threats to his identity. He had learned the difference between hardship and hopelessness. One could be managed. The other nearly destroyed him. His days were full in a simple way. Work, responsibility, care for the child, small moments of reflection. He paid attention to things he once ignored. The sound of laughter in the home, the comfort of routine, the strength that came from honesty. He thought often about the version of himself that once believed he was finished. That man felt distant now, like someone he used to know rather than someone he still was. Losing everything had forced him to face himself without titles, without approval, without protection. The child had grown into a steady presence of hope. Not fragile anymore, curious, confident, watching closely. Learning not just from words, but from how he handled life. Sometimes they talked about the past, not with bitterness, with understanding. He made sure the child knew that mistakes did not define a person forever, but choices did. People from his past no longer had power over him. Their laughter, once painful, now felt irrelevant. He did not need their regret or apology. Peace had replaced that need. He continued to live carefully, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. He trusted slowly. He listened deeply. He spoke honestly. The nanny remained a quiet presence in his memory, a reminder that courage did not always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looked like noticing details. Others ignored and choosing to act. This final part of his story was not marked by celebration. It was marked by calm, and that calm was the greatest victory of all. This stage of his life arrived without drama. No sudden events announced it. No one pointed to it and said something important was happening. Yet Part 11 quietly became one of the most meaningful chapters of all. He had reached a place where stability no longer felt temporary. For a long time, every good moment used to carry fear behind it, as if it might disappear at any second. Now, that fear had softened. Not gone completely, but no longer in control. His routines grounded him. Morning light through the window, preparing simple meals, reviewing work tasks with care, helping the child get ready for the day. These small acts formed a rhythm that brought peace. He had learned that healing was not about erasing the past. It was about making space for it without letting it dominate the present. Some memories still hurt, but they no longer dictated his choices. Trust returned slowly, both in others and in himself. He no longer questioned every decision or replayed every mistake. He accepted that growth came from action, not perfection. The child observed these changes closely. They learned resilience not through speeches, but through watching him show up every day, even when tired, even when unsure. There were moments when opportunities appeared that once would have terrified him. New responsibilities, long-term commitments. This time, he did not run. He evaluated, prepared, and stepped forward. He understood now that being strong did not mean being unbreakable. It meant being willing to continue. Even after breaking, this part of the story did not involve revenge, exposure, or applause. It involved maturity, and maturity, he learned, was the quiet confidence of knowing who you are. Even when no one is watching, he did not realize at first that this part of his life was about letting go. Not of people, not of responsibility, but of the version of himself that always expected the worst. Part 12 unfolded slowly, through ordinary days that carried quiet lessons. There was a time when every knock on the door made his heart race. Every unexpected call felt like danger. Now, those reactions softened. He noticed the change one afternoon when a problem appeared at work, and his first response was not panic, but planning. He paused, thought carefully, and handled it step by step. When it was resolved, he felt something unfamiliar, but welcome. Confidence built on experience, not ego. The child continued to grow, not just physically, but emotionally. They spoke more openly now, asking questions about choices, consequences, and fairness. He answered with honesty, careful not to burden them, but never hiding the truth. Home felt warmer. Laughter came more easily. Silence felt peaceful instead of heavy. He reflected often on how much energy he once spent trying to prove himself to people who never intended to understand him. That need had faded. He no longer chased validation. Instead, he focused on presence, being there when it mattered, listening without distraction, showing care through actions, not promises. The nanny's influence still echoed quietly through his life, not as a dramatic figure, but as a reminder that awareness and courage could exist in ordinary people. This stage of his journey was not about fixing the past. It was about living well in the present. This part of his life felt like a deep breath he did not know he had been holding. Part 13 was not about new struggles or dramatic turns. It was about learning how to live steadily, without constantly looking over his shoulder. He noticed how his thoughts had changed. Problems still appeared, but they no longer felt like signs of failure. They felt like tasks to be handled. This shift brought a quiet confidence he had never experienced before. He became more patient, especially with himself. When mistakes happened, he corrected them instead of punishing himself. That alone changed the tone of his days. Work remained consistent. He was trusted not because of his past, but because of how responsibly he handled the present. People noticed his calm nature, the way he avoided unnecessary conflict and focused on solutions. The child continued to grow into their own sense of independence. They spoke with clarity, asked thoughtful questions, and showed empathy that surprised him at times. He realized that resilience had quietly passed from him to them. Home felt balanced. Not perfect, but real. Conversations were honest. Emotions were allowed. Silence was peaceful. He no longer felt the urge to explain his past to anyone. Those who mattered already understood. Those who did not were no longer important. This stage of the journey taught him that success was not loud. It was steady. It was waking up without dread and going to sleep without regret.